Jumbo, my beautiful people, and Aquaba to the Espresso Talk Today show. Welcome to Espresso Talk Today. I'm Amma Robin, your humble host, and we are back today for another powerful episode of our great and groundbreaking podcast show. This is where we keep it raw, we keep it real, and we keep it unapologetically black. You know the vibes. Today, we are diving into a topic that hits close to home, white pleasing. Yep, you heard me right. We're talking about those moments when we switch up, dial down, and dim our shine to seek the approval of white folks. Trust me, it's about to get real. So, let's break it down. White pleasing has lots of different names, and they all describe what it means. White approval seeking, code switching, assimilation. In my day, it was also called Oreoing. White pleasing is not just a simple act. Nothing simple about it at all. It's a way of living black in a white Western society that devalues us and has got us playing small and playing safe. White Western society encourages us to wear that white-pleasing mask. But we know what we're wearing. They don't. They believe we don't mind when they tell racist jokes, or that we're always so happy to take on their work assignments, or that we're just grateful to be allowed in the room and at the table. And let me tell you, kings and queens, that this is a lie straight up from the pit. Oh, we have a lot to talk about. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're feeling this episode, share it with your crew, your circle, and everyone in your community. Now, let's close the door and get started. I have a story for you. I was recently having lunch with friends. These friends were white, all of them, American and European, except for one friend who was Japanese. One of my American friends started talking about her trip to Senegal and was discussing how she had visited the island of Gorée. She actually did not call it that name. She called it Slave Island. I put in quotes. Repeatedly, Slave Island. Then she discussed how millions of slaves, I put in quotes, had been brought there to be shipped out to the Americas. I cringed every time she used the word slave. I bit my tongue when she referred to the island of Gorée as Slave Island. To hear her discuss her visit to this island of torture, pain, and despair, from which millions of people, that's my term, had been shoved and squeezed onto ships where the torture, pain, and despair would continue until they reached their destination, where the torture, pain, and despair would continue until they died, was offensive. My friend discussed the trade in human beings, or the slave trade, with a smile on her face. She might have been discussing the transport of oranges or spices. She was discussing people, my people. I was angry and deeply offended. Can you guess what I said to her? Can you guess? I said nothing. That's right, I said nothing. Why? Because I pictured everyone rolling their eyes and saying that I'm too serious about everything, or that it didn't really matter, or that I shouldn't be so sensitive. I felt utterly alone in the room. I was utterly alone in the room. So I just bit my tongue and waited for her story to end. Do you recognize this behavior? I know you do. Let's say it all together. White pleasing. So, what is it? What is white pleasing? Well, It's also known as white-pleasing behavior or white approval seeking, and it refers to the practice of Black people conforming to or adopting white behaviors, attitudes, preferences, or white Western cultural norms. This is an effort to gain acceptance, approval, or assimilation into predominantly white social, cultural, or professional spaces. This behavior often involves downplaying or suppressing our own cultural identity or heritage in favor of adopting the practices or the cultural norms of the privileged, dominant white culture. White-pleasing behavior can manifest in different ways, such as altering one's speech, appearance, mannerisms to align to white norms, or distancing oneself from one's own cultural roots, or avoiding discussions or actions that challenge or confront systemic racism. Yes, there are a lot of things it could be. Now, you might be asking, why would anyone do this? It's not normal. But let's not get judgy here. White pleasing is a complex response to societal pressures and systemic racism, and this can have significant psychological, social, and cultural implications for Black people or other people of color from marginalized backgrounds. But we're going to go deeper into this in just a minute. So we have all seen white pleasing. Yes, I'm going to keep calling it that term. And I would be hard pressed to find a Black person who has not done it. It's part of the Black experience, mentality, and behavior. This really goes way back. It's also a coping tool for dealing with white supremacy and a strategy for advancing professionally, academically, socially, securing career contacts, and even, keeping you safe. So why am I talking about this if we all know about it and we all do it? Because, wait for it, we do it so much and so often that we might not even be aware that we're doing it. We just know when to do it, what to do, and how to do it. Let's discuss a few white-pleasing behaviors. And throughout this podcast show, I'm going to mention a few real-life scenarios to bring it home. You've already heard my story, and it was hard to tell. But it's important to be honest, for me to be honest with you. So I'm just going to mention a few behaviors, but I have a much, much, much longer list. If you're interested, then go to look in the website or in the Instagram page. Okay, let's have a look at a scenario now. Okay, here we go. Scenario number 1. When a group of friends makes racially insensitive jokes, Lauren, who is Black, awkwardly chuckles too. Wow, how many of us have done that? What is her goal? Why is Lauren doing this? Good question. She is avoiding acting like the angry Black woman stereotype, and she wants to maintain her status within the group. Yes, and this is how she does it. This is how she has to do it. We've all seen movies and TV shows in which poor Black people are smiling at wealthy white people, or Black porters back in, days in the last century smiled at white trained customers even though the customers were rude, or Black domestic workers smiled when they cared for demanding white women and their children. They often had to ignore their own children while they stayed working late in white homes. Or we're also extra polite, timid, or compliant to white police officers, white teachers, and our friends' white parents. And yes, we also did white pleasing during slavery. Hey, we were trying to stay alive, trying to avoid being beaten or raped, trying to prevent our children from being sold, and even trying to escape to freedom. Unfortunately, it did not always work, but we always tried. So I'm going to ask again, where does this come from? Black people are not, or have not always been, just walking around shucking and jiving and smiling and just acting happy to please white people. We were not born seeking white approval. No, this is a learned behavior. When did it start? Why did it start? Now, ETT listeners know what I'm going to say, and I know that you know. I'm going to say it anyway. Slavery. Centuries of slavery, colonization, and systemic racism have left deep, deep, deep marks on Black Americans, individually and collectively. The push to assimilate or to avoid othering often stems from struggling to gain acceptance, succeedance in white society, and to avoid persecution or harm. In short, we know how to act to gain acceptance by white society and how to make white people more comfortable. I think this is a good time for another scenario. Okay, here we go. Marcus consciously switches to a different accent and different vocabulary to sound more like his predominantly white classmates. His goal? Conform to the group speech patterns to gain acceptance and to avoid isolation. We've been taught since we were children that when white folks feel comfortable around us, we're more likely to be accepted in every way. We get the job or promotion. We get the house that we're looking to buy. We get a seat at the table. We're even safer when we're accepted by and accepted around white people. So we act in certain ways that please, I put that in quotes, please white folks. There's some other causes that are related too. Number one, first, this is another one of mine, another big one, systemic racism. Historical and systemic racism have created an environment where white culture and white norms, are held as the norm, the standard. This pressures us to conform to these white norms to gain acceptance, recognition, or access opportunities. It also encourages us to act to be more white to ensure our own safety. Now we got to remember that the white Western norm is not the norm. It is only one norm among many, Black, Afro, African, Afro-Caribbean, and lots of others that are equally powerful and important norms. Here's another one, related. Power dynamics. The power dynamics in society, with white individuals often holding positions of power and privilege, can lead to a subconscious desire to seek validation from them. Everyone wants to be connected to the power source, right? We might feel the need to appease white people to avoid being marginalized or discriminated against, or overlooked for a job or promotion. 3, this is a big one for me, particularly since living in Europe, Eurocentricity. This one really burns me up, but they all do, it's true. But Eurocentric thinking is considered normal. I'm going to say it. It's not normal. It is white supremacy in action. I get just choked up saying it. It is so pervasive that we don't even recognize it anymore. But if you look closely and critically, the Eurocentric behavior or white supremacy is so obvious. We'll dive into that more in other shows. Stay tuned. I promise we're not leaving that. But we're going after it and we're going to tear it down. Why is this important? Because white culture is often portrayed as superior or more desirable, in the media and education and other societal platforms. This causes the inferiorization of anyone who is not white, or anyone who is Black or brown, to be exact. Then we reject our culture and struggled for white acceptance. There are a few other factors involved here. Microaggression and stereotypes, this kind of pressure, they pressure us to distance ourselves from our culture and identity. Tokenism puts us in the position of representing all Black people all the time. So we want to appear less threatening and more acceptable to white colleagues and friends. Being the first one or the only one is not easy. It's hard. It's very hard. Not saying to avoid it, just to know what you're stepping into. And I never forget the media influence. The media representation reinforces harmful stereotypes and underrepresents Black perspectives, experiences, and voices. And this impacts how we feel that we can represent ourselves and what white people expect from us. The real root, though, is racism and white supremacy, which has been allowed to intentionally uplift white people, particularly white men. White supremacy also suppresses and inferiorizes black people. This is intentional. And white supremacy, the machinery of white supremacy, is continuing to do its job every single day. It doesn't actually even need white people in the room for it to work anymore. They just enjoy the benefits while we experience the consequences. I won't get started on why, that this is why we deserve reparations. Reparations, and yes, even more reparations. From the period of enslavement that lasted for hundreds of years and decades of segregation and Jim Crow, black people today are the survivors of a cruel, unjust, and racist system that has taken almost everything from us: family members, housing, freedom, life, and dignity. Yet we're still here. We are survivors, and we deserve reparations and justice. Okay, I went off a little bit, but I'm not wrong here. Okay, I'm not wrong. White pleasing is a form of abuse, even if we are complicit in it. You know what? Let's look at some examples here. I think it's a good time.
Girl, to get a lot of dough, anything is possible. Turn me up in the headphone. Yeah. Grind to get a lot of dough and dirt through all the obstacles, cause anything is possible. Yeah. Oh man, I got a lot of gold. Stack that bread.
Okay, yeah, let's look at some examples of white-pleasing behaviors. I said we do them, but sometimes we don't always recognize it. And I'm sure white people absolutely don't recognize it. So everyone's going to learn something here. Okay, first one, changing speech patterns or vocabulary. Okay, altering one's accent, tone, or vocabulary to match what is perceived as a standard or acceptable way of speaking. Adapting clothing choices and hairstyle and grooming habits to align with mainstream or Eurocentric beauty standards rather than embracing natural or culturally significant styles. Here's a spoiler alert. We are going to be discussing tone policing in a few weeks. You won't want to miss that show. Okay, number 2, suppressing emotions. Suppressing or altering emotional expressions such as laughter, assertiveness, or anger to avoid being perceived as confrontational or too emotional, or even being considered too black. Number 3, minimizing or avoiding cultural discussions. Steering clear of discussions about race, ethnicity, or cultural experiences to prevent discomfort or conflict with white peers. Number 4, social activities. Participating in activities or hobbies that are more aligned with white cultural norms, even if they're not personally enjoyable to you. Number 5, choosing only white friends. Surrounding oneself with the predominantly white social circles to avoid potential judgment or stereotypes, associated with one's own racial or ethnic group. Sometimes we don't have a choice in that, who we can choose for friends. But if you do have a choice and you're choosing to surround yourself with only white friends, you may want to consider that more. Let's look at a few. Some of these are kind of obvious, but let's look at a few of the more subtle forms of white pleasing. You better get settled for this one. Number 1, laughing off microaggressions. We often nervously laugh or dismiss microaggressions or racially insensitive comments instead of addressing them directly. Another one, number 2, assuming a neutral stance, taking a neutral position or avoiding taking sides in discussions related to race or social justice issues just to avoid conflict. Sometimes you don't care. Sometimes you are neutral. I know you see both sides. But if you do have a position and you don't take it, you try to stay neutral, may want to think about that one. Number 3, staying silent. Remaining silent or avoiding speaking up in a situation where racial bias or stereotypes are expressed, even if they're uncomfortable or offensive. Okay, this one hits me personally. This one really cuts me to the quick because that's exactly what I did. And I had a lot to say, and I was on the verge of saying it, and I didn't. Okay, Staying silent. A lot of us do that. We're often taught to stay silent as children because we know that if we speak up, we can be in some trouble. But we're grown-ups now. We do what we want, presumably. Number 4, downplaying discrimination. Downplaying instances of discrimination or racism to avoid making other people uncomfortable or to fit in with some kind of perceived norm. So we suppress or downplay our own emotions or our own experiences when the other person is actually the bad actor. Gosh, that's really insidious how white supremacy can make us change how we behave and perceive and feel about situations just so that they can feel better, just so that we can avoid getting into some kind of trouble or being punished or face some kind of persecution. And number 5, downplaying experiences of racism. Dismissing or downplaying personal experience of racism to avoid making others uncomfortable or to avoid being labeled as too sensitive. Man, white people pull that one out quite a lot to do. And so we know when we've experienced racism, but we'll often just not say it. Then they feel better and we just let it go. And by the way, as I said, I am not judging anyone. I have been there and have been there more than once. So we're just bringing it into the light here. That's all. But I'll go back to my white-pleasing scenario, where my ancestors were being, dehumanized. Let's see, I think I use several of these. I suppress my emotions about it. I suppress my anger and irritation at hearing my friend use the term slave rather than people and telling her story with such insensitivity. I didn't say anything. I suppressed my emotions about that. I also stayed silent. As I said before, I didn't speak up about her story because I felt that I would have been teased and isolated. And another one is avoiding confrontation. I chose not to confront my friend, to correct the misconception and falsehoods in her story. And I'm even going to go with I avoided cultural discussions because, I felt that they wouldn't get it. They probably wouldn't have, but, sometimes you still got to say it anyway. Perhaps they would have. The point was for me to correct the history. So let's look at another one here, another scenario. This one does not involve me. Okay, Malik, a Black accountant, distances himself from social justice issues, publicly condemning movements for racial equality. Yeah, that actually does happen. The goal? Gain trust, acceptance, and professional respect at the office. That's pretty wicked that one has to do that in order to get respect. So, okay, let's go on here. These subtle forms of white pleasing can often go unnoticed and unaddressed, but they still contribute to internalized pressure to conform to white cultural norms and expectations. Recognizing and challenging these behaviors is a step towards embracing authenticity and breaking free from the cycle of white pleasing. But I gotta say, it is a balancing act. We're completely justified in correcting the history or in speaking up about our emotions or letting people know when they've spoken out of line. But there are consequences on the other side of that balance. It's unfair, it's wrong, but they're there, it's real. White pleasing makes us smile, even though we are offended. It silences us from talking about racism, history, or our culture. It prevents us from practicing our culture. It makes us change our appearance, name, speaking pattern, and hair. And we're rewarded for doing these things. But we are punished, ostracized, and isolated for being ourselves. White people do not experience this. Black people and other people of color learn at an early age to do it effectively. Some of us have even internalized it as normal. It is not understood as the consequence of white racism or Eurocentric thinking. It definitely is not normal. And it takes a serious toll on our mental health and identity. I know how I felt when I stayed silent while my African ancestors were being called slaves, angry, degraded, ashamed. not because my ancestors had been captured and kidnapped and enslaved, but because I had not spoken up, because I had let someone, a friend no less, define my heritage. Oh, that hurt. That is what white pleasing does. It allows white people to continue to live in blissful ignorance or racism, while black people feel dehumanized and enraged.
Gonna get a lot of dough. Anything is possible. Turn me up in the headphone. Yeah. Trying to get a lot of dough and dirt through all the obstacles, cause anything is possible. Yeah. Oh man, I got a lot of goals. Stack that bread and dominoes.
I mentioned mental health effects, and I really just kind of want to finish up with this. White pleasing or constantly seeking white approval affects our mental health. And there are lots of different ways, but I'm only going to mention 3 on our health about healthcare. On mental health. More is going to be listed on the website. Let's go with the first one, code switching stress. That's not easy to say, so I'm not going to say that a whole lot. Constantly adapting yourself can be exhausting. Always feeling fearful of discovery or making a mistake can lead to mental fatigue and stress. Number 2, social or professional isolation. Engaging in white pleasing can lead to isolation from family, community, and culture. This isolation can create feelings of loneliness and abandonment. And that just really hurts. And we've all heard of imposter syndrome. White pleasing may lead us to imposter syndrome or feeling like we don't belong in certain spaces. It may also cause us to question our competency and capabilities, and this can lead to persistent anxiety and self-doubt. I think about some of the black people who did in the past, and sometimes even now, go with passing. They must always be looking over their shoulder or acting a certain way so that they don't get caught. They don't get discovered. They don't get outed. That must be a terrible way to live. And that's what white pleasing or passing, which is an extreme form of white pleasing, does. So the mental stress of white pleasing can also lead to depression, anxiety disorders, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. People must wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what did I do? Will I get caught? How can I change? Will my past catch up with me? And one thing that I found, I'm just going to throw this out there, when seeking white approval, is for me to do deep breathing. This puts things into perspective and calms down my stress. Taking 4 deep breaths, or even taking 6 is even better, is a powerful tool to take back control and to get back in touch with myself. So I just take those deep breaths, and it doesn't change the outer situation, because that's just bad, and that's not all me. But it does change how it affects my mental health, even my physical health. No one should ever have to choose between living authentically or being fully accepted as an equal and valued member of society. We can stop feeling ashamed or embarrassed without responding this way to white supremacist pressures, but we can also stop calling out other black people who are responding in the same way. As I said, we all do it. Some do it in a really extreme way, I won't mention any names, and others just do it on a consistent, regular basis. We all have our reasons for doing it. So, let's not point fingers. And honestly, the problem is not black people. The problem is, I'm going to bring that up in just a minute. I'm going to hold off on that because I want to give you one more scenario. Then we're going to discuss what the real problem is. Okay, let's go to Aisha, a black woman, refrains from wearing traditional African clothing to white social events. What's her goal? Avoid looking too ethnic or radical. Yeah, that's right. That may feel like it's nothing, but I often want to wear dashikis, or I want to wear African clothing, or wear a headscarf. And I really think about, what environment am I going to be in? And I don't think that white people have to go through that. They just throw on their clothes, and they can even throw on African inspired clothing and look more hip and cool. But Africans put it on, or black people put it on, and we look radical. So, and we make them uncomfortable. Well, anyway, a lot of us do an Aisha, so I'm not calling her out. Now, I'm going to return to what the real problem is. It is not white-pleasing behavior. That's just the effect. The real problem, the real enemy here, have a seat, hold on, white supremacy, racism, Eurocentrism, anything that inferiorizes blackness. But let's be aware of our actions and why we are doing what we're doing, as well as the unintended consequences of our actions. Remember the balancing, but remember the mental health and self-care. And white pleasing is not self-care. So let's try not to stress and exhaust ourselves, but let's act intentionally and strategically, and always act with love and dignity. And let's connect with our culture and our communities. We don't have to do white pleasing when we're in our own communities, when we're practicing and loving and honoring our culture. We should always be lifting up black people, and particularly black children. But I'm going to close this episode by reading a poem, a famous poem actually, by Paul Laurence Dunbar. He was one of the most influential poets in American literature during the 19th century. Paul Laurence Dunbar was born to previously enslaved parents, and he wrote the poem, We Wear the Mask. He wrote this in 1895. We wear the mask that grins and lies. We hide our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the day is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Paul Laurence Dunbar, 1895. Yes, that was a long time ago. And just think about it, how much has really changed. He is saying it all in that poem. And we're still doing the same thing because we have to. And think about it though, I ask you, how do you wear your mask? What does your mask look like? Whatever mask you wear, however you wear your mask, always wear it with dignity. That is a wrap for today's episode. Remember, we are rewriting the narrative. We're redefining, what white supremacy is. We're outing white supremacy. So please share this episode with your squad, and let's keep this conversation going. Remember, we are all in this together, and we're not backing down. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button and share this episode with your fam. You can subscribe at the Espresso Talk Today website at espressotalktoday.com. And if you want to keep discussing or reading about these issues, then you should definitely subscribe to our weekly Black Empowerment newsletter called The Nomo Beat. We discuss lots of different issues there. So get your dose of Black empowerment every single week. It's never a dull moment, but there are lots of growth moments. And you can subscribe, again, at the Espresso Talk Today website, at espressotalktoday.com, or on Instagram, Ama Robinell, Ama underscore Robin underscore the letter L. I'm Ama Robin for Espresso Talk Today. And remember, now more than ever, strength, soul, and reparations. Ashe.